Yeah, I'm sure that you're learning a lot of beautiful lessons from your mother and kind of what her lived experience was back then as well. One of the things that you have spoken to me about, and you said that your sister was 4 while you were pregnant, while your mom was pregnant with you, is that your sister does suffer from a mental health condition of schizophrenia. And I
Mhm.
want to know from you, what was that sort of experience like living with a loved one with a mental health condition? And when did she necessarily get diagnosed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my sister, she started displaying symptoms of her mental illness probably around the time that she was 11, 12, and it manifested in different ways. At first, she had a disorder called trichotillomania, which is where you pull out your hair. So she was pulling out essentially all her eyebrows, eyelashes, some hair on her head. And that was very scary and confusing to me because I was so much younger than her. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking that she was like a scary monster when she didn't have the hair on her face because she looked different.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first signs that she had a mental disorder. And then the next thing developed, I think, when she was around 13.
Mm.
She um, had a really bad eating disorder. She had bulimia and then anorexia. And then shortly after that came the suicide attempts, which were constant almost every week. And I really, as a young child, I just wanted to help her. And
Mm.
I spent a lot of my childhood watching her and sort of being almost like a second caregiver to her because my mom was a single mom. She had
Yeah.
to work full time. So I was there watching her through a lot of it. But the diagnosis it wasn't instant that they knew that she was schizophrenic. At first, it was just trichotillomania. Then it was an eating disorder. And then it was bipolar. And then as she got older, they realized that it was schizophrenia.
Wow. And that must have been a lot on you as well for not knowing what that is and how to be able to be there at such a young age. I mean, I know what it feels like to have to kind of be the parent to another person. And sometimes that can actually be quite daunting on yourself.
Yeah, no, it was a lot to take on. And I've talked to my mom about it since then. I'm like, I would have wished, because now my sister actually has a child. So I'm like, be careful about what you're putting on the younger children around because it was a lot, I think, for me to take on. And at the time, I didn't realize all that I was taking on. But it's not normal to have your younger child in the home trying to stop the older child from suicide attempts every day. It really was like constantly having to watch her. If you left her alone for 30 minutes, you would find her hanged or overdosed
Mm.
on pills. It was just constant chaos. And so, anyone else or parents watching this, if one child is sick and the other isn't, you really need to make sure that there's other people there instead of putting that on your child because it was very stressful, even though I didn't know it at the time.
Can I ask you one thing? Because I know that I would like to be asked it if I was in your position, in the sense of, what did little Lana need in that moment? If you could speak to little Lana, who was going through those day-to-day lived experiences, who at that point was just trying to survive and help another person, what would you say to her?
I mean, I don't know if there is anything that could have helped because children, when you're in a home environment or a home situation, you really have no control over anything or your own circumstances until you're 18, which is really unfortunate.
Well, I mean, it's more of asking a question of, the love that maybe you needed back then to know that you were looked after as well. Because sometimes when you look after somebody else, you can feel that lack of support in your own journey, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure that you were going through your own relationship with your mental well being while also taking care of somebody else who was going through theirs. And so, I guess it's the question of, how was your mental well being back then while you were taking care of somebody else? Because that's a really hard job to do at such a
Mhm.
young age.
Yeah. I don't know like what I would tell her. When you're young, I don't think that you really process things like that, like, oh, I'm sad right now, or oh, I should talk to a therapist, or oh, I should get help for this. You just don't really think about things like that. So I always just thought, oh, I'm fine. Like once the situation's over, I'm gonna go to school or I'm gonna go to cheerleading practice and everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Do you think that that's sort of what led you into kind of escaping into films and TV and kind of looking at this glamorized lifestyle? I know you talk about how The Girl Next Door was sort of your opening eyes to just the sex industry in general, and kind of was that first way for you to sort of go, ooh, that can maybe be something that I want to get into one day, and the glamorization of it. Do you think that maybe there was a sense of escapism through watching TV and film like that that kind of guided you into that next journey in your life?
Yes, 100%. So that was one thing that I did do to cope with the situations. I remember being on Christmas break and my sister was having an episode, and I had a laptop at the time, and somehow I found The Girls Next Door. It was no longer airing on TV, and I just started watching every single episode, and I just thought to myself, wow, these girls, at the time I'm like a child, I'm like 12. I'm like, they
Yeah.
have a trampoline, they have a big yard and a zoo at their house, and they're so pretty. Their life looks amazing. And so I sort of, I guess, going back to your prior question, that's sort of how my young mind got through the circumstances and all
Mm,
the trauma that I was going through, by knowing that when I turned 18, there was going to be an out where I could go be like these girls that I was seeing on TV. So it very much was glamorized to me because they looked like they had this perfect life,
mm,
which is really deceiving to young girls because
yeah.
it's come out that a lot of that just wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I've listened to other podcasts with Holly Madison, and which was one of the girls from The Girls Next Door that I was watching, and she's also very unhappy with a lot of her experiences. So it can be very deceiving, and I think it's important for young girls to know that what they're seeing online and what they're seeing on TV isn't necessarily reality. And for many others like myself, I ended up putting myself in positions and doing stuff that I had no business doing because I thought that it was going to be like what I was seeing on TV.